Okay, so last week I went out for a walk in the forest and we picked some of the finest ceps I've ever picked and ever seen. Brought them home, sliced them and laid them out to dry on racks. Unfortunately we had then a couple of days of rather damp conditions and so they didn't dry as quickly as I'd hoped. So one day I put them in the oven as it was cooling down after we'd cooked dinner, expecting that the residual heat of the oven would just dry them enough to make them ready for storage. Unfortunately I misjudged it and they ended up getting burnt and toasted in the oven, which was a bit of a disaster, and I decided right there and then, never again. So I bought myself this. It is a digital electronic food dehydrator. It's got 6 trays. It's, I think, 300 watts. And it wasn't that expensive. It was about £27, which I thought was quite reasonable. So, I have already opened the box just to make sure it was intact, but let's get it out and have a look at it. Okay, so here we are. So, we've got a timer, it's got temperature controls, and it's got 6 of these plastic trays. Yeah, so we've got 6 trays, one of which has a fine mesh on it for smaller items, I presume for berries or something like that, so that they don't fall through. And then the trays just stack one on top of the other, and then we've got a fan heater in the bottom that blows air through the whole assembly. So I think all that remains now is to get back out there, get some more mushrooms and have another go. Eva is straining at the leash because up ahead we've got a couple of young deer running through the trees there. No, Eva, you can't play with them. That noise over in the distance, that's deer. Specifically, I think male deer, advertising their dominance. I think it's rutting season, and so that's probably a big stag. For that reason, we have Eva on the lead. I'll keep the camera handy in case we actually get close enough to see them. So there's one over there calling, and there's another one over there answering it. And I suspect this is 2 large males, probably both of whom think they want to be the boss. I'm not sure we're going to get close enough to see them, but we'll have a go. So here's a fungus I don't think I've talked about before. It's commonly found in close proximity to conifers, which makes me hopeful that this is the saffron milkcap. Let's have a look and see. So if it is, yes it is. So when we bruise it, we get this saffron orange coloured milk comes out of the stem and out of the gills. That's definitely one for the basket. This is considered a delicacy in Europe. First time I've picked it, but hopefully not the last. Now here's something I always look out for, Amanita muscaria. Some really beautiful specimens there. Poisonous mushroom. This one won't actually kill you, but it will give you stomach cramps and wild hallucinations. And there's a huge colony of them there. Now, it has always been my experience that when I find Amanita muscaria, I find ceps not very far away. So I don't think they actually grow in kind of cooperation with each other. I think they just happen to both like the same things. So we're going to have a little look in here, because this makes me hopeful I'm going to find some ceps. This is conifer woods actually though, so it would be unusual. So we'll just wander up the side here and have a look. But we've got loads and loads of Amanita muscaria. Really nice ones. In fact, that one there looks a little bit like Amanita caesarea, because it's got a yellowish kind of flesh and no spots. But I don't think that is. So yeah, like I said, there we go. Boletus edulis, growing spitting distance, and there's another one down there. Spitting distance from Amanita muscaria. Very, very reliable indicator, Amanita muscaria, that you may find ceps in the same area. So this one here I think might be, yeah, a little bit, I don't know, it's good condition. I'm tempted to pick that anyway for drying. But this one down here is a perfect specimen. And we're going to have this one definitely. Beautiful. Wow, look at that. That is a beautiful mushroom. And there we are. Amanita muscaria right there. And the ceps were here. So I think we'll have a wander up there, because I see some more amanitas up there. Looks like we're going to have enough to fill our basket today. Do you know what? I think I'm going to leave that mature specimen there, because it's producing spores. And I think it would be a shame to take that away. Okay, we've got a couple of oyster mushrooms here, but rather too far gone. I'm not going to pick these. So what this tree actually would have been, it almost looks like holly. I didn't realise that oyster mushrooms grew on holly, but that's all of the trees in this wood. They're all holly. So it probably wouldn't be safe to pick those anyway actually, because holly is poisonous, and mushrooms that grow on poisonous timber usually end up being poisonous themselves. So I think even if those were sound, I don't think we'd pick them. So just one more thing to note before we go home. Here we are in the middle of October. I mean, it's a lovely, lovely blue sky autumn day. But here we are in the middle of October and the gorse is flowering. There are not many times of the year when you won't find at least a few gorse flowers. Anyway, we've done really well for mushrooms today. So we're going to head for home now. So happy to say we went out and found some lovely ceps and one mushroom that I believe is a saffron milkcap, but I will identify that fully a bit later before we actually try eating that. But anyway, that one aside, let's get to know the Porcini or cep a little bit better. So young specimens of ceps, we've got two different ones here. So we've got a kind of slender form here where the cap has actually come off completely. But this is definitely a cep. And the fatter ones, like this, with a very bulbous stem. Now when they're young like this, the cap feels kind of rubbery, maybe slightly velvety. And if it's wet, if it's raining, that could feel slightly slimy. As the slender forms grow up, they turn into what looks like a very nice little neat bread roll, which is where they get their name. They look like a bun. And as you can see, they've got a kind of flying saucer type shape. The larger ones, though, the ones that start off fat like that, will tend to grow into bigger, more robust specimens such as this. And the cap margin goes a little bit wavy like that, and the stalk often goes a little bit distorted and twisted. The stalk is always white, but netted with brown on a cep. If you find one that's netted with grey, you're looking at a different species. And again, the cap remains, it feels like kind of hard rubber. It's kind of slightly grippy, ever so slightly, not sticky, but grippy like a rubber ball. A good specimen should sound a bit like an inflated basketball when it's tapped. And then we've got an even larger specimen here, and this is probably about the limit to which they can be eaten, really, because it's starting to go a little bit soft here. The pores on these mushrooms, they don't have gills, they have pores, so it's like a sponge underneath there. And in a mature specimen like this, those pores will be yellowish green. In a younger, less mature specimen, they're sort of creamy yellow. And in a very, very young specimen, so this is the little one here that we picked, they're white, and you can't even see that they're pores, they're kind of closed up. So, that's the cep, or porcini, or penny bun. One of the very best edible mushrooms, and really it's best enjoyed dried and then used as a flavouring in soups. It's not the greatest of textures. If it's just fried as a mushroom, it tends to be a little bit kind of slippery, slimy, a little bit insubstantial, but dried and then rehydrated and reconstituted into soups, it is a powerful and amazing flavour. So what we're going to do now, we're going to slice up some of these mushrooms and get them ready for going into the electric dryer. So we're going to get them in there and get them dried. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this mushroom here, I'm just going to cut that bottom piece off completely because it's just covered in dirt and we really don't want that mixed in with the bits we're keeping. So this is, as I say, this is about the most mature specimen you'd probably consider picking of a cep. You can go bigger than this and then you peel the gills off, peel the pores off and discard them, and you can still eat the white flesh as long as it remains solid and white. But very often in an ordinary year, this year we don't seem to have suffered so badly with it, in a regular year, when they get to this size, they're most commonly full of maggots. I don't think that's the case here though, so I think we've been lucky, and I think that's the prevailing weather conditions have brought that about. I think where we've had such a dry summer, the flies, which would be producing the maggots, have not done so well this year, and so as a result I don't think we're going to have maggots in our cep here. In fact, normally you'd see, because you'd see them all the way in the middle of the stem there as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut that in half. It's far too big to dry whole. Yes, this is a really nice sound specimen. If there were maggots in here, you'd see lots of little brown tubes and holes in here and in the pore material as well. But this is just fine. So I'm going to cut it one more time this way, and then I'm going to cut it into slices, which we'll put straight on the dryer. So slices maybe about that thick, about 3mm thick, 2mm thick, and we'll just lay those and try and tessellate them as neatly as possible on the dryer. And the smaller pieces I will reserve for this top tray, which won't allow them to fall through. In a specimen like this we also get to see the spore print there, because that bit of stalk is underneath the cap there and it's captured the spores that have come out of the mushroom. Now when you cut a true cep in half, there should be almost no discoloration here. If you find that this is going greenish or blackish, then you've got a different species. Not necessarily a poisonous species, but just not Boletus edulis. The gills will sometimes stain a darker yellow, maybe slightly olive green on a cep, depending on the age of the specimen. But there shouldn't be any major discoloration when you slice it in half like this. The smell at this stage is actually not all that mushroomy, not all that fruity. All of that mushroom aroma develops when these are dried. So there it is. I've only used 4 of the 6 trays, but that's fine. And they're all loaded up with my mushrooms. And I've set it on 40 degrees centigrade for 10 hours. And that will hopefully just give those mushrooms a good dry. What I know it won't do is burn them like I did myself. Okay, so we ran this drying machine for about 5.5 hours and it dried nearly all of the mushrooms. So we've got, that is the contents of my basket yesterday, now in dried form, and you can hear how properly dry those are. Interestingly, there always seem to be, and you get this with natural drying methods as well. Oops, oh, I have pressed a button by mistake. There always seem to be a few pieces that don't quite dry as quickly as the others. So I've got a few pieces here that are still a bit leathery and feel a tiny bit damp. I think it's probably where I cut them a bit thicker. So consistency of cutting is probably quite important here. I did my best, but we've got some pieces that are not dried out as well as they could be. So I'm going to put this on for a couple more hours on 55 degrees centigrade, and we'll just dry out these extra little bits before we store them, because if I was to store that in that state, that would go mouldy because there's just a bit too much moisture contained in it. So I will just put those on there. I'll show you how easy this is to operate. So we're going to change the temperature. It's on 70 centigrade at the moment. We're going to go down to 55. Oops, 55. And then timer, we're going to go down to 2 hours and start. And there we go. And that will turn itself off at the end of 2 hours. Okay, so now these have had another couple of hours and they're definitely dried out enough. Now what we need to do is wait for these to cool down before we put them in the jar, just in case any of them have got still little damp bits, because they would just steam and that would cause condensation in the jars and that might cause mould. But it does look like these are all properly dried out now, so just got to let that cool down. So actually I'm going to let that happen off the device. I'm going to take that off and put it on the table there. And then the rest of those mushrooms can be put in the jar. And so my basket full of mushrooms has made about 1 jar full of dried mushrooms. And that will probably see me through the winter for soups and things like that, because these are quite powerful in flavour now that they're dried. The other thing to talk about is this jar. This is one I modified last year, and what I've done here, this is a Dow Egberts instant coffee jar. This plastic piece comes off and the lid has actually got a void in it, so I've filled that with silica gel packets, and I've got little holes in there so that the lid absorbs any moisture that is in the jar there and keeps those really nicely preserved. So that's it, that's my adventure with drying mushrooms the right way, and it's very much easier this way than it is doing them just with air drying, much more reliable. So yeah, I think I would probably rate this as quite good, this machine, this electric 6-tray dryer. I'll put a link in the video description to where I found it, but one of the things I find is particularly useful is the area it's got. It's got a very nice large capacious trays, and yeah, I think it's pretty good actually, and very good value for what I paid. So that's drying mushrooms the easier and more reliable way. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.